Thanks for joining us on Locked On Jayhawks, and don't forget to check out some of our recent episodes talking KU football. We talked a little Bill Self update, gave an update on his health, and plenty other content here on Locked On Jayhawks. On to our tight end room preview for KU football. You go from defensive tackle, where that's one of the higher floor positions for KU, to tight end, which the floor is a little bit lower here. Now, the ceiling could be pretty high based on some young guys performing, but after you lost DeShawn Burnett late in the game, who was going to play, big snaps for you, after you've lost over the last couple of years a handful of tight ends, this is a position group that is going to be relying a lot on a player in DeShawn Hanika, who I think is a talented player and could have a really good season for KU, but also is somebody who hasn't played an organized football game since 2022. So that puts a lot of pressure on him to perform. 6'6", 245-pound redshirt senior, coming off a bad injury as well. Again, I think he has the talent to perform, and it'll be a great story if he does, and I hope he does. But that is a lot of pressure on somebody to do that. That was the beauty of having Keon Burnett, whereas if it takes a little longer to get in the swing of things, you have this guy from Burnett. He ends up bouncing back to Arizona after transferring in for the spring. Now, battle for the two deep, I think it's wide open. Leyton Cure, the former transfer from Emporia State, 6'3", 245 redshirt senior. One thing I think is interesting about Cure, he got a little bit of run last year. He was coming off a season-ending injury from the year before. And so typically guys, the second year off that injury are going to play better. I could see Cure taking a nice little leap forward because of that. Boden Groen was a late add from Rice after they lost Keon Burnett late. 6'4", 240-pound redshirt senior. He has 60 career catches, so productive player. How's he going to be as a blocker? Not as explosive of a player downfield, but dependable, and that'll certainly be helpful for KU. And the guy kind of making noise right now is Carson Bruhn. I guess the final parting gift from Andy Kotelnicki before he left to Penn State. Kotelnicki was at least one of the recruiters on Carson Bruhn. He was obviously the tight end coach at the time. And Bruhn decided to keep his commitment to KU after Kotelnicki left for Penn State. And he redshirted last year, 6'6", 255-pound redshirt freshman is what he's listed as, which giant dude at tight end. That's always cool to see. But maybe he's the game changer. What if he's one of those young guys that does end up on the two deep, where he does end up the backup or something, or at least the third string? And we know KU likes to play a lot of two lineup sets, sometimes three lineup sets. And one of my big questions for this team is who's going to play that Jared Casey role, right? Because the Jared Casey role is a little different than just the traditional tight end. Sometimes you're going to play tight end. Sometimes you're going to line up at tight end. Other times you're going to be fullback. Other times you're going to be an H-back. Other times you're going to come in motion. Other times you're going to come set. Could that be Carson Bruhn? Could that be Leyton Cure? Could that be Boden Groen? I have no idea. I think I would almost look to Cure or Bruhn as being the two guys, but I find that very interesting with this position room. Now, future to watch, Bruhn would obviously be one of them. I think, honestly, if you're projecting who's the 2026 starter, Bruhn would probably be the guy right now. And then can Jaden Ham, local recruit from Eudora, 6'6", 250 redshirt sophomore, can he, have a season where the light bulb goes off for him and he starts to make inroads as a former highly recruited player that KU flipped from Arkansas. You also have Quentin Conley and Conley Hovey on the roster. I think the biggest questions, storylines for this unit coming into the year, again, you have players returning from injury in different regards that are going to have a big impact. Hanika, his first year coming off a serious injury, hasn't played a real football game since 2022. And Leyton Cure, his second year coming off the injury. Those are different, right? It's for Hanika, he's just coming off the mountain. For Cure, he's kind of rising up in that regard. How does that affect this group for KU? For a group, they want to use a lot of players and ideally would like to have good usage in the passing game too. At the same point in time, if the group isn't ready and doesn't have as good enough depth, maybe it limits what formations KU can or wants to run more often. And maybe we do see more 3 or 4 receiver sets for KU football this season because of that. But that'll kind of be dependent on the personnel, right? And so who's going to emerge? Who is KU going to be forced to play at that kind of Jared Casey role? Who's going to play more of the inline tight ends? Who's going to be the tight end who comes in to be that extra blocker? Is somebody going to be a better blocker than a pass catcher? Those are all going to be questions that kind of remain to be seen. And I think there are a lot of questions for this position group. It might be the one that I'm most scared about. I'm most scared about the offensive line. KU has built up trust that they're going to figure that out. And they do have some at least foundational pillars and pieces that they can point to on the offensive line. It's more so just that I have questions of, okay, what happens if this is just an average offensive line for KU as opposed to what we've seen the last 2 years, which is one of the better ones in the conference. With tight end, it's less important of a position as offensive line. So they could end up being below average hypothetically and it doesn't have as big of an impact. So it just depends how you kind of want to look at it. But that can quickly change too, right? If Hanika is back to the guy that he was in 2022, if Cure improves another year off the injury, if Groen is at least a serviceable, quality player, dependable guy, and Bruhn does have that kind of young breakout where he's taking a step forward, this position group should at least be as productive as it was last season, where, Jared Casey was an all Big 12 fullback, but I don't think Jeff Grimes' offense used the tight ends as much, and I think Jalen Daniels wasn't able to throw over the middle of the field as much. Part of that was Grimes. Part of that was I don't think JD had as much confidence throwing over the middle field, which you hope that's back kind of this year. But yeah, it'll be very interesting, the usage, I think, above all else, and we'll see if this position group, because that has been one thing. Every season, I think there you could point to with Lance Leipold and his staff, there's been a position group that has I think surprised people. I think back to 2022, and coming into that year was like, oh man, KU lost Kwame Lassiter. Like, I don't know, this receiver core. I don't know if they have enough talent there. And it ends up being pretty solid core that ends up being your starters for the next 3 years, right? You look at the group last year that I guess you could say maybe the defensive tackles were maybe that a bit of a surprise unit for KU. Maybe I don't know where else you would point to, because last year's kind of a different year. But like 2023, I'm trying to think what that would be. I don't know. Maybe it'd be the progression of Jason Bean. Maybe it would be the 2023 tight end core. Maybe I don't know, a lot of different ones that you could point to, but like it feels like there's always a position group or a big player that surprises, and it wouldn't be surprising if that ended up being the tight end group. So we'll see what they bring to the table, and maybe Carson Bruhn is the savior that they need. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page, where you can like and subscribe to the show. One day closer to the start of KU football and their game against Fresno State. We'll have plenty on it, so make sure to subscribe to the show right here on Locked On Jayhawks.